Hello, my friends. How are you? Welcome to another episode of 30 Albums for 30 Years. I am your host, Jay Sweet. This is a special global pop episode. We began our program by listening to Hava Nagila, performed by the Jewish Starlight Orchestra. Hava Nagila is one of the first modern Jewish folk songs in the Hebrew language. It's a song of celebration, often performed at Jewish weddings and bar and bat mitzvahs. It was composed in 1918 to celebrate the Balfour Declaration, which announced its support for establishing a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, and the British victory over the Ottomans in 1917. It was first performed in a mixed choir concert in Jerusalem. The lyrics translate to, let's rejoice, and be happy. Let's sing and be happy. Awake, brothers with a happy heart. Awake, brothers with a happy heart. So today we will be discovering Klezmer music. So let's get into it. Klezmer music and the music of the Jewish people. Okay, let's take a second to talk about the Israeli people and their ancient roots. The Jewish people trace their history back to the biblical patriarch Abraham, who was considered the father of the Jewish faith. From 13th to the 12th century BCE, the Jewish people are believed to have been enslaved in Egypt and were led to freedom by the prophet Moses during the Exodus. This event is central to Jewish identity and is commemorated during the Passover celebration. Moses received the Torah during this time on Mount Sinai, providing the foundation for Jewish law and belief. In 1000 to 587 BCE, the Jewish people established a kingdom in the land of Israel under the leadership of King David and his son, King Solomon. However, the kingdom eventually split into northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah, and both kingdoms faced various invasions and challenges. From 586 to 539 BCE, the Babylonians, led by King Nebuchadnezzar, captured Jerusalem and destroyed the first temple. Many Jews were exiled to Babylon, marking a significant period of Jewish dispersion and a longing to return to the Promised Land. From 538 to 70 CE, the Persian Empire allowed Jews to return to Jerusalem, and they rebuilt the Second Temple. This period saw the compilation and additional texts that make up the Hebrew Bible. From the 1st century to the 4th century CE, the Roman Empire occupied Judah, leading to tensions and ultimately the destruction of the Second Temple. This event is known as the Jewish-Roman War and resulted in further displacement of the Jewish people as they scattered across the Roman Empire. Between the 5th and much of the 15th century, Jewish communities thrived in various parts of the world, including the Middle East, Europe, and North Africa. The Jewish people significantly contributed to culture, science, and philosophy during this time. Then came more persecution and expulsions. The Jews faced persecution and expulsion and forced conversions in various European countries during the late part of the 15th century. The Spanish Inquisition and the expulsion of Jews from Spain in 1492 were significant events. Between the 18th and 19th century was a time known as the Age of Enlightenment, which brought about new ideas of religious tolerance and political emancipation, allowing the Jews to gain greater rights and integration into some countries. Then, a significant event, of course, is the Holocaust, which happens during World War II, leading to the genocide of 6 million Jews by Nazi Germans. After the war, widespread international support and the United Nations led to the establishment of a State of Israel in 1948, providing a homeland for Jewish survivors and immigrants. When it comes to art and entertainment, the Jewish people have had a significant impact, which is pretty amazing considering that the Jewish population makes up about only 2% of the world's population. There are about 14 million Jewish people. And in the US, 2.4% of the population is Jewish, or 7.6 million. But when it comes to entertainment, those low numbers seem to have little impact. In fact, just for example, 80% of comedians in the US are Jewish. Now, in terms of music specifically, some major names in terms of classical or concert music are Felix Mendelssohn, Aaron Schoenberg, Gustav Mahler, George Gershwin, Leonard Bernstein, Aaron Copland, Philip Glass, just to name a few. In more popular music, the following have Jewish heritage: Irving Berlin, Bob Dylan, Billy Joel, Adam Levine, Pink, Lenny Kravitz, Neil Diamond, Barbra Streisand, Bette Midler, Gene Simmons of Kiss. There's numerous others I can point to. So just to make it clear, the Jewish people have had a significant impact on arts and entertainment worldwide. Now let's talk klezmer music, a traditional form of instrumental music rooted in the Ashkenazi Jewish culture. It originates in Eastern Europe, particularly in the Yiddish-speaking Jewish communities of that region, and its name is derived from the Yiddish word klezmerim, which means musicians. So Ashkenazi Jews, it's a kind of a blanket term to discuss the Jews who lived in Central and Eastern Europe. Now, in terms of musical characteristics, instrumentation, klezmer music is typically performed by smaller ensembles, often including instruments such as the clarinet, the violin, the accordion, trumpet, trombones, flute, and various percussion instruments. Klezmer melodies are known for their emotive and expressive qualities, but often the rhythms are danceable rhythms, so they're kind of fun songs rhythmically. And as you can imagine, klezmer music has a strong association, as I believe I mentioned earlier, with Jewish celebration, such as weddings and bar mitzvahs and other joyous occasions. It's basically meant to accompany dancing. Another characteristic of klezmer music is the use of improvisation, creating melodies on the spot, much like jazz music. And of course, most of klezmer music is sung in the Yiddish or sometimes Hebrew language. We begin our journey into klezmer music with Dave Taras. Born in 1895, lives till 1989. That's a nice long life. Taras was a skilled clarinetist born in the Ukraine to a musical family. After leaving the Ukraine, he lived in Great Britain for some time and then settled in New York in the 1920s. During this time, New York had a thriving Jewish community with a Jewish theater district, and Taras worked within those theaters, but also worked as a studio musician, mainly for Columbia Records, where he can be heard on over 500 recordings. Now, klezmer music fell out of favor during World War II, but Taras was one of the key figures to keep the tradition alive. We will now hear a selection of pieces called Yiddish folk songs from Taras's album, The King of Yiddish American Klezmer Music. Next up is Neftal Brandwein, born in 1884, lives till 1963, an Austrian-born clarinetist who, along with Dave Taras, was considered to be one of the top klezmer musicians of the 20th century. Brandwein comes from a family of klezmer musicians. In 1909, he came to the U.S. and settled in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. He recorded heavily beginning in the 1920s, first for Columbia Records and then for Victor Records. His career declined from the mid-1920s on, really, and his contract with Victor expired in 1927. During this time, he worked mostly in hotels in the Catskill Mountains that were nicknamed the Borscht Belt. This was an area where a lot of Jewish Americans would go on vacation. In 1941, he returned to some studio work but seemed to struggle with new contemporary styles, and he was not a good reader, so he struggled to find good work in the 1950s, but he did continue to play till shortly before his death. But he was mostly known in the 1920s. Now, Brandwein was not only known for his virtuosic talents, but also for his humorous staging and his antics, which included wearing neon signs, plugged-in Christmas lights, which once nearly electrocuted him, and the occasional pulling down of his pants. From Brandwein, we will hear Nifty's Freelock. In it, you will hear his clarinet techniques, and also take notice of the usage of the woodblocks as a percussion instrument. There are definitely some interesting comparisons that can be made between his style of klezmer playing and the music of early jazz. Please enjoy. The Klezmatics are an American klezmer musical group based in New York City who have achieved fame singing in several languages, most notably mixing older Yiddish tunes with other more contemporary musical styles of different origins. They have performed in more than 20 countries and released 11 albums to date. Today, with 3 original members, Lauren Sklamberg, Frank London, and Paul Morissette, they still perform. The group has had several lineup changes, but those 3 have remained. And the Klezmatics are, without a doubt, the most successful proponents of klezmer music in the world. Check out this song. It's called Man in a Hat from their 1994 album, Jews with Horns. Andy Statman is a virtuosic mandolinist and clarinetist, known for pioneering a fusion of bluegrass, klezmer music, and jazz. Statman was born in Brooklyn. His family includes a long line of Jewish cantors, that's religious singers. He learned how to play the mandolin from a master, David Grisman. And then, after sort of making a name for himself as a mandolinist, Statman began playing the clarinet and klezmer music. So check out this track. It's called Hasidic Melody. It includes David Grisman from the album Songs of Our Fathers. Please enjoy. All right, my klezmaniacs, one last artist for today, the fantastic David Krakauer, a highly creative clarinetist who was born in Manhattan. He was a one-time member of the Klezmatics. In 1996, he formed the band Klezmer Madness and toured the world. And since he's been part of several projects that blend klezmer music with various genres, including electronic music. You can hear some of this on his newest album, Mazel Tov Cocktail Party. For a selection, I've chosen a song called Human Tribe from the Anachronic Electro Orchestra with David Krakauer from 2016. This one's really cool. Take a listen. I want to thank you for listening to today's program, and I'm going to get a little serious here. I do not normally discuss politics or personal thoughts beyond music on this podcast. Still, with an audience that reaches 33 countries, including Israel, I only thought it appropriate to give some commentary on the horrific war that is occurring in Israel right now, especially since this podcast episode discusses the music and the culture of the Jewish people. And plus, this show will be archived and hopefully heard for many years. As we are all aware, on October 7th, 2023, a vicious attack occurred at a concert in Israel in which Hamas terrorists brutally killed 1,400 people and took 200 or over 200 as hostages, most of which are not yet accounted for. As a response, the Israelis have launched devastating attacks in Gaza in an effort to avoid another terrorist attack like the one that recently occurred. Now, Israel's response and Hamas's pushback has led to a terrible humanitarian situation. So, full disclosure, my heritage, as I found out actually through 23andMe, is 99% Ashkenazi Jew. Now, I don't know anyone who's 99% of anything. Now, of course, Ashkenazi is not a place or a country. So the reason I am likely classified in that way, I was actually looking to see what countries my ancestors came from. But the reason I was probably classified as an Ashkenazi Jew is that, many of the Jewish people were displaced throughout Europe, a common occurrence amongst the Jewish people. And so maybe it's hard to pin down where my family is actually from. Now, I did do religious training as a kid. I also married a non-Jewish woman, so that 99% no longer exists within my children, and that's fine. Honestly, I don't really identify or prescribe to any one religion, but I do have a certain connection to my heritage, of course, and the heaviness of the Jewish people. So I certainly understand Israel's desire to defend itself, and I am also deeply saddened for any innocent people who have lost lives and loved ones due to this war. I'm also fearful, as many, of the global response related to this war and the elevated anti-Semitism and xenophobia that is being spread throughout America and internationally. No one deserves to die or lose loved ones and their homes due to the sins of government, terrorists, or racists. It seems clear that a peaceful solution to this conflict may not happen anytime soon. And it scares me that the human race has not learned. They have not learned to be tolerant, caring, and most important, nonviolent. So I close today's show with the Jewish Mourner's Kaddish, which is often called the Jewish prayer for the dead. I send this prayer to all the innocent people whose lives have been lost or affected by this terrible war. I close by saying shalom and peace.